You'll be able to hear the voices of a lot of people who are witches now, and also hear from people who have benefited from the craft.
The word witch originally means wise one, and this is what people try to aspire to be. They try to learn the wisdom of nature. They try to learn the meaning behind things.
People get Satanism mixed up with the old religion is because very early on, as I say, the church, at least in this country, and to a great extent on the continent, took absolutely no notice of the survivals. The Roman Church very sensibly told them to adapt the old gods to become saints and to use the same places of worship, and they did to a great extent. They went along very well. Well, the church became more and more rich and unfortunately more and more corrupt. They also had this curious idea that everybody in the church must be celibate. So you had a hotbed of either people who were being celibate and were seething with misery and repressions, or people who were not and were therefore of a bad conscience. And the people began, after a while, to be irked by these people with so much money and so much in the way of possessions, when the peasantry and the majority were in a dreadful state of poverty and sickness and one thing and another. And there became murmurings against the church. Now the church became insecure and frightened, and they had therefore to build up some sort of whipping boy, and therefore all the minorities suffered.
Witch. The name is derived from the Anglo-Saxon word wicca, which means wise. Witchcraft simply means the craft of the wise people.
Came about. We start our journey 25,000 years ago, at a time when humankind had a belief in animism. It was then thought that a god controlled the gusting wind, a god lived in the raging river, a god controlled the sky. But most importantly, so far as day-to-day existence was concerned, that there was a god of hunting and a goddess of fertility.
For a few, this is still part of the old religion.
I think the most important part of any religion is the way it makes you live. Not what you say, but how you live. We can only influence those who come in contact with us, not by what might we say, but by never doing the wrong thing ourselves.
Witchcraft, Wicca, is a religion of paganism. It's the religion that accepts the seasons as being magical.
Witchcraft is the old religion, a religion which existed thousands of years before Christianity. It is a fertility cult. We worship a great life source, called the Divine Creator, if you will.
So upset, Patricia, when he says the occult and you want to call it the craft?
Because it is the craft, it's a religion. Okay, but we do not have children in the craft anyway. Nobody's admitted under the age of 25.
Why do you want to become a wish? Why do you want to become a wish? What do you get out of it? When I tell them you get peace and contentment and joy, they can't understand that. They want to know, don't you make money out of it? Well, I say you don't. Well, you must make money. You make spells to get yourself money. I say you don't. Well, you always make spells to win football pools. I say you never. But you never do that. Why not? Yes, it's simply ritual. We mustn't do it.
The festivals are tied to the natural year. The beginning of the year is Halloween, which is the beginning of November. And that is when my group, as my family, shall I say, though they're not as a group, had the Great Assembly. All the clans held their Great Assembly. And it is because they called on also the souls of those who were dead, who had been, that has grown into Halloween, when they imagined souls wandering around, ghosts about the place, witches, etc. And that was the great festival of the year, when all the business of the house, the family, was done.
It is a religion. It's not a game. I've seen people who thought it was a game and how they finish up in this life. Pretty sad. And yeah, they'll make their money and but in the long run, what do they have? Do they have family? Do they have people who truly love them? Do they change people like their shoes every few months? Is it a used thing? If you see a teacher that uses people, stay away from them. They're not teachers.
So, They're only white witches, because if you're initiated, you are a white witch, and there's only one way to get into the craft, and that is to be initiated.
So
I'd say to a person who really wanted to know what was the spirit of witchcraft, that they'll learn more by, say, going out on the downs at midnight and listening to the wind in the trees and looking at the full moon. They'll learn more of the spirit of witchcraft, the real spirit of witchcraft, in that way than they will by reading any amount of books.
Ours is the oldest religion in Western Europe, and it's being revived again by ordinary people. People like you and me, all over the country and here in Sheffield. Witchcraft is among us now.
The actual religion of witchcraft is based on the universal religion of paganism, which is at the root of all civilizations. It's a prehistoric religion, and that gives us the sustenance to continue.
That rearranged, recoloured by me. Christians go to heaven, I suppose, and the witch goes to the Summerland. That is just an expression. But the Summerland is a place where pain and suffering disappear, where one lives a happy, contented life, where one is free to join one's ancestors. We believe a lot in joining our ancestors, you know. I suppose there's something Chinese in me. I always look at it as a joke, you know. I always think that what was good enough for my ancestors is good enough.
Witchcraft is the craft of the wise. It is the religion that accepts the existence of a goddess and a god, and of the goddess and god being polarized equal forces.
And witchcraft, the power comes from the gods. It mustn't be misused. You can misuse the power of the wise, but you use it to do. So it's as plain as that.
Your craft, I suppose, quite a lot of bad publicity
Yes, I think I must dissociate myself from the horrific allegations of Mr. Dickens, because the people in the craft today are very marvellous people. They are people you find everywhere, in every walk of life. And not only here, but in America, in Australia, in Europe, everywhere. Many, many thousands of people.
Yeah, but are there people...
It's to do really with the animalistic side of man, the fertility, which has been knocked out of so many religions, the sexual, the life-giving, the profound. Rather, the horns represent a sort of animalistic nature, and which is revered because Wicca believes in pleasure, believes in love-making, believes in affection and generosity.
It means that we worship the very source of life itself, the life that is responsible for the whole universe.
Witchcraft to us is an ancient religion. It's pre-Christian. Witchcraft does not worship a devil or a Satan or an evil god or goddess, but we do have a god and a goddess. I guess from a patriarchal point of view, we're a matriarchy, but to us our religion is equal. The goddess empowers women and the god empowers men.
Everyone will look at this in horror and say, my goodness, it's the devil. Why? Because he has horns. He is a hunting god. He was taken from agricultural societies that required and lived by hunting and husbandry of animals, and so the horns became sacred.
This represents the principle of nature. You know, the people look at that and think, hello, he's wearing the devil's horns and so on. But the idea of the devil wearing horns is quite a new one. Throughout the Old Testament, horns are a sign of God-given power. And that's what they were a symbol of. In fact, there is a statue of Moses wearing horns somewhere in the Vatican. And so...
we believe in the horned god and in the goddess of the moon. Now, this doesn't mean that we're silly enough to think that the moon in the sky is a goddess. I don't think any educated pagan ever did think like that. But what this means to us is the masculine and feminine powers of nature. They're symbols, magical images, and by means of our imagination, we can make a real contact with these cosmic forces. the forces of nature, the forces of life.
What I tell people, if I'm giving a lecture to people who are new, who really have never thought about paganism at all, I say to them, you know, you may not realize this, but if you go far enough back, all of your ancestors were pagans.
I mean, long ago in these ancient hills, people worshipped goddesses and gods, and maybe in each different village they called the goddess a different name, they called a god a different name. They didn't think they were worshipping different things. They recognized they were worshipping the divine in many different ways.
You see there a beautiful and naked woman invoking towards the skies, towards the moon. Really, the goddess is seen in every woman. She's Mother Nature, and we worship every part of nature.
As you realise, the mother is a much loved figure who also gives much love.
Really, not the craft.
Not
anyway,
the craft.
Not the craft. But I do think that all these allegations are being put across onto the occult, onto the old religion, because there's so many priests of the Christian church being found guilty of child abuse over the last 2 years, and also through the last few months, actually. And yesterday there was about 4 in the paper.
Let me just come.
I mean, I think the fundamental thing about the magical religions and about pagan religions is that ultimately they say within yourself, you are the god, you are the goddess, and
I'm not anti-religious. I think I'm anti-hypocrisy.
I agree with you.
I think if you're a Roman Catholic, be a very good Roman Catholic. If you're a Protestant, be a very good Protestant. And I think if you're a witch, be a good witch. And I think if you're a Church of Satan, change.
Good.
There's a lot of confusion between Satanism and witchcraft. The two terms are usually lumped together as one. Satanism, as it stands, is basically a reversion and perversion of Christian symbolism, whereas witchcraft, or Wicca as we prefer to call it, is a totally separate, autonomous organisation that has its own form of worship, which is not related to Christianity in any way at all.
You know, and that was in a time where it was accepted that everyone of any given state had to be of the same religion. And the persecution centuries are roughly from the sort of 15th to the 18th. The church was determined to stamp out paganism and our kind of religion, if you like to put it that way. And so they branded it with all sorts of horrible propaganda, including the idea that we worship Satan and so on. And when the persecution died out, this sort of fairy tale image remained.
And it
We're now
hasn't
trying
just happened
correct.
to us, has it? I mean, it happened to the Jewish people as well.
I mean, for many, many years that there was a large gray area between psychiatry and religion that was untapped, and no religion had ever been based on man's carnal needs or his fleshly pursuits. All religions are based on abstinence rather than indulgence, and all religions, therefore, have to be based on fear.
I think Gerald would be appalled. I mean, so am I. I mean, I can't understand the reason for this, because we know that the goddess is the mistress of all the animals. I mean, and she'll have something to say about that. There'll be a terrible amount of bad karma come to these people. I mean, it's horrific, and it's never been taught in the craft. It never has been, as far as I know. Well, of course it hasn't, but I think it's disgusting. And they're certainly not genuine members of the craft, and they should be booted out. And if they are sacrificing animals, they should be reported to the police immediately.
No, Satanism has absolutely nothing to do with either paganism or with modern witchcraft movement. You can't worship Satan unless you believe in the Christian system of mythology in which you have a Satan and a Christ who are real figures. If you don't believe in Christian religion, it's stupid to worship Satan.
Another. If people want to be evil, then they can be evil, and of course they will be evil whether or not they're connected with occultism. If somebody is a psychotic, then they will always be psychotic. On the other hand, the very small amount of ill that is done, when it's where to go into the potentials that are available through occult study and technique, is just such a fractional percentage that it's not worth really bothering about.
Christians, as well as many other religions, and even a lot of the occult groups are around, are afraid of us. We threaten them, not physically, but our existence and our philosophy threatens their security because we pose questions that they don't want to face and that they don't have answers for.
Witchcraft or Wicca, pagan religions with devil worship. They feel that it's evil, that we're harming people, that we're putting spells over people without, consulting them, and we're really not coming from that space at all.
Well, we don't feel that fear is necessary to base a religion on. The fact that religions for thousands of years have been telling people what they should do and what they shouldn't do according to the basic whims of a person who might be running the show is very understandable. We're realists, we Satanists, but we also feel that a person has to be good to themselves before they can be good to other people. This is a very selfish religion. We believe in.
There's been a lot of talk about black and white magic, and it's important to distinguish between the two. There isn't a generic kind of magic which is black. There is magic, pure and simple, but the use of it depends on the good taste of the operator. Now, unfortunately, there are people in creation, there must be room for them, for all potentialities. It's unfortunate that they do exist, who are more inclined towards the sinister aspects of magic, towards the darker, primarily because it gives them either a vicarious thrill or an excuse for their own sexual abnormalities. So there's nothing wrong with that, providing they do not harm another. But unfortunately, because most of them are exhibitionists, they tend to be the ones that the newspapers get hold of, and that's the image that's been presented of occultism generally.
One day the laws of magic will be understood. They're becoming more and more understood. There's magic in the seasons, in being in love, in anything beautiful you see, in friendship, in all sorts of things. That's natural magic. People are now beginning to understand things like ESP, transference of thought, and healing. Now all these things can be called magic. And as you grow, you find you're so much in it that you don't think of it as a second thing or something separate from your beliefs and your life.
Centuries has taught that there is an external God whom we shall serve. Whereas I think the truth is that God is within and that the answer to our questions is within. We believe that good and evil are human concepts.
Dabbling in the occult that goes on today scares me. These people think that they're doing something terribly clever and terribly with it, and it's all great fun. And what they don't understand is that they're invoking forces which they can't fathom, and they're making themselves a channel by which those forces can come through into the world.
Because I believe that nature is a very, very good example of how to live. You watch things grow, you see them blossom, you see them bear fruit, you see them die back. This fits in really well with the seasons of the year. And as you watch the landscape and the growing things out there, it also happens on an inner level as well. So a certain
must do this.
I think that's absolutely essential that people should think for themselves. Because if people don't make their own contact with the inner planes, they're not going to have any power, are they? This is enormously important. And it is important for people not slavishly to follow anyone's lead, I think.
By linking in with the planetary and seasonal cycles and becoming at one with the planet. So most people involved in witchcraft tend to be ecologically minded. They tend to love animals and also be gregarious and willing to help and serve others.
The idea is not just to swallow a religion pill handed to you by an authority figure, but instead try, test, probe, investigate. We cannot emphasize it too strongly that you should encourage in yourself that skepticism which you may have been told is wrong. The only way to come to the truth you can really believe in is to find out which you believe, through the thoughtful elimination of errors and through finding new, older, better ways.
Of others.
When you become a witch, the first thing you learn about this natural power of the universe, which is all around us and that we use all the time, every single member of the human race uses it, is that fingers with it. Therefore, you use it wisely. You use it in a positive sense.
Which manifests in many different ways. It's kind of tuning in. I mean, if you look around at what's here, life's bursting through. It wants to speak to us. We sing Life in Abundance. It's the summer solstice.
Traditional witchcraft is that which has been hidden in the English countryside and elsewhere abroad for many, many years. And in some ways it does differ from what one has to say is the more modern version, which was promoted by Gerald Gardner and Alex Sanders. Because I think it's undoubted that Gerald did put in many of his own ideas.
You kind of feel very much in touch with yourself, perhaps rational or integrated, and it gives you that, and again and again. It also gives you the kind of the communal stuff, a sense of belonging with a group of very like-minded people.
Even if you don't necessarily...
The killing of Giordano Bruno. And I said back to the Vatican, the letter, if you had been who you were supposed to represent, you never would have murdered in the name of God. We are the only religion that has never murdered in the name of God. We've never had a holy war, because number one, the only thing that wars do is put holes in the human body. We have never murdered people in the name of God. That is something that the craft has an honor in.
Rule number one upon...
No, I think Wicca is merely a modern word because they didn't like witchcraft, because witchcraft has all these other connotations connected with the devil, according to Christianity that is, and black magic and all this sort of thing, and, which it hasn't really, but that's what people think. So they brought this other word in, Wicca, which is a masculine, actually. It's a masculine word. If you said W-I-C-C-E, it would be feminine.
Ooh.
But it's W-I-C-C-A, which is masculine. But never mind, it's okay. It's an okay word, I suppose.
Concept that has come through because witchcraft was taken underground. Yes. And when anything becomes secret and goes underground, a mystique is built up about it. And legend is added to it and added to it. And the things that we don't understand or don't even take the trouble to understand are the things we're afraid of.
That's very true. We usually...
Me and many thousands of people along with me intensely that the word witchcraft should be lumped in with Satanism. I mean, it is just a complete generalization, and any academic in the world would throw it out of court completely. A witch cannot be a Satanist. It is an absolute physical and semantic impossibility.
I'm sorry. One of our basic beliefs is, and it harm none, do what you will. And that none includes yourself and includes the psyche of other people.
But bound up in the religion of witchcraft, there is also the practice of magic. And magic is a power. It's an abstract power. It's the power of genius and creativity which courses through the universe. It's nothing at all secular. It can be applied by anyone. And magic is the method or the technique whereby you apply that formula. The power is a natural power. It's one that anybody can use. It actually holds you up. Magic is the intensive creative power which gives you thought, gives you reason to be. It's not secular at all. So therefore, the application of it is a question of technique rather than belief. Once you understand that magic does work, you can use it for all facets.
The life-giving force is a form of energy, and all energy can be used for good or bad. Electricity can be used to light a room or to kill. Water can be used to sustain life or to drown. And what man does with the energy is what is really meant by free will.
And we believe if we set our minds on a thing, we're going to get it. You know, Paracelsus said that the beginning of all magical operations is determined imagination. And this is what we set out to do. Get a mental picture of the thing we wish to achieve, and in that way concentrate on getting it.
Their own powers, I think that's very important, because I know a lot of people criticise old Gerald. I've criticised him myself, but I will say this for him, that just about the first thing he ever taught me was that the power is in you, and you have got to learn to bring it out. And all the trappings of the circle, the magical tools and so on, are simply there to enable you to do that, to create the atmosphere. For you to bring out your own power, which is natural, which is latent in everybody. And it isn't some sort of gift which people are given by some supernatural force. It is simply drawing out the natural powers that people have hidden in the depths of their own minds and psyches. I think that's true.
Very high indeed. I mean, obviously, if you talk about candle magic, the most basic kind of thing is birthday cake magic, where you blow all the candles out on your birthday cake and immediately you've performed a magical ceremony. It's very basic magic, but it is also very effective because it works with karma. We do healing spells, for instance, healing rituals.
I maintain that in order to work magic effectively, you have to bring your light and your dark together in order to create that magical spark. That's how sparks are created, positive, negative, together. It won't happen if you're all positive, and it won't happen if you're all negative. You have to have that frisson in the middle.
Well, when I was a child, I always felt much closer to a great life force when I was out of doors, far closer than when I was in the four walls of any church.
Well, and Christianity seems to be offering no better option than sitting back quietly and accepting it and waiting for something better to happen hereafter. It seems a little more positive to hope that you can plumb your own depths and find some meaning and fulfillment while you're actually here, and we like to think that we offer that. After all, if you are
The reason that Christians are frightened of witchcraft is, one, history is always written by the winners, and Christianity won and paganism lost.
Chris Bray, would you allow your son to come to witchcraft?
Well, of course not, no.
Well then, why deny us that facility, that freedom?
We are not.
In reverse.
May I come in there? We're not denying you that facility or that freedom. Every man has a free choice to declare his own destiny and find his own destiny. But Jesus Christ...
Anthony, isn't it stepdaughter? Wasn't he a little bit frightened? Are you frightened of me? We could do rituals for them, couldn't we? Shall we do a little one? Shall we? You know the tree. Would you like to do it with me? Put the music back on, Nicky, just for 1 minute. Alex, why do you involve such a young child? Because you're part of my family. And why should I involve her with the church and not with my own church?
That we offer that. After all, if you are a born-again Christian and you really do believe that come a nuclear holocaust you'll be swept up in the rapture to heaven, then you really won't be doing that much to stop it. In fact, you'll rather be looking forward to it. I think that sort of a more pagan or occult worldview tends to be a life-supporting and life-enhancing worldview, which is better than the predominantly sort of, which I see as more sort of death-orientated worldviews of the born-again Christians.
Yes, I do, but I also feel that truth is persecuted. I feel that there's a lot being said that implies that the church, because it claims to have the word of God, is de facto correct. Does this mean, I mean, for example, I'm not a Christian, I don't uphold Christian principles in terms of Christianity. What I object to is being told that I am wrong simply because Christians believe that they're right.
Witchcraft is in this country.
We see the pagan community being continually infiltrated by what we would call Christian ideals, and I think we're going backwards, not forwards. I think in the 60s and 70s we were free and we were happy, and now we're back uptight.
Practicing more of the ways, the habits of thinking that we see in conventional religions.
There are 3 routes that you probably came here, but this is the truth. If you're black, your traditions were stolen from you through slavery. And if you're Native American, most of your traditions were taken from you through colonialism. And if you're white, most of your traditions were taken from you because your great-great-grandparents or your great-grandparents wanted to assimilate so fast that they basically threw out all the traditions. So the truth is if you're sitting here in the United States of America, no matter who you are, you don't have the songs, you don't have the lullabies, you don't have the creation myths, you don't have the coming-of-age ceremonies, you don't have all the things that, in fact, every indigenous culture has. And what this is all about, what Wicca, paganism, all of this is about, is trying to find, for us who are bereft, who are searching through the ashes, essentially we want a rich, juicy, vibrant, earth-based tradition to give us the sustenance we need at the same time that we want to live in the modern world with integrity. We want to dance around a bonfire at night and have ecstatic traditions and get up the next morning and still be able to be a doctor or a computer programmer or whatever we want. And what we're trying to do with all of these traditions is we are trying to create a modern, vibrant way of having the best that the old indigenous traditions had for all people, and yet have a way of living in the modern world. And that's essentially what this journey is really about.